Good evening to you, and welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. Wherever you are, whether you are in Europe, North America, the wider Caribbean, of course, those of you who are in Guyana and other parts of the globe that I did not mention, welcome to today's edition of Politics 101. On Tuesday, we had two members of the hierarchy of the People's National Congress speaking about the party and where it has been and where it is in the moment. That's where we ended. I posed the question of whether the PNC was in crisis. The party members gave their answers. Today, we want to open it up to independent commentators to weigh in on what's going on in the PNC, where the PNC is. Only today we saw two statements coming out of the party, one from the Central Executive Committee, which accused the leader of stepping outside of the Constitution, one-manism, etc. That is not a new narrative. It has been going on since the election was awarded to the PPP last year. And then we had a message from the leader on the 10th anniversary of the APNU. That seems to be a sore point. The leader, of course, admitted two new parties. We know two other parties left the coalition. And that seems to be, among other things, a sore point in the PNC. We're going to talk about all of that tonight and try to make sense of what's going on in that political party. Of course, the PNC is one of two major political parties in Ghana. It has been so since it came into existence in 1957. So the party is 64 years old. And in many regards, the PPP in its present incarnation, one could argue, came into being after the split in 1955 and then the second split in 1956. The PPP coming out of those two splits took the name of the original party, but in many regards it became a new party. So the PNC is one of the two major parties, and what happens in that party is of great significance, not only to the membership and supporters of that party, but to the country as a whole. So tonight, to take us through the discussion on what now for the PNC, we have Dr. Henry Jeffrey, who has a relationship with the PNC of sorts going back. He worked closely with that party. I would not say that he was a card-carrying member. He will have to say that for himself. Ojiana Thomas, a political commentator and consultant, who has already indicated that he has an interest in political office. Mr. Norman Brown, who lives in London now, but has been an activist in the PNC, and I think at some point may have been acquainted with the AFC. He has an online show that comes out of London. And finally, Mr. Rickford Burke, who's always in the news, is the president of the CGID, and he has been a lot in the news recently, confronting Mr. Attorney General Anil Nandlal in New York, and there is a case, we understand, I read it for the first time in the so-called mainstream media. The Demerara Waves today finally carried a report that the NYPD is investigating a charge made by Mr. Burke against Nandlal. We haven't seen it yet in the other mainstream media, but that is to be understood. Gentlemen, welcome to Politics 101. I am going to, and Audrienne is not on yet, but she will join us shortly. Gentlemen, I'll throw the question to you, and each of you will take a bite at it. The question I asked Hamilton Green and Dr. Van West Charles the other night is the PPP, is the PNC in crisis? And I will start with you, Henry Jeffrey. Is the PNC in crisis?
It's difficult to speak. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And good to see you all, gentlemen. It is difficult to speak of these parties as being in crisis given the nature of what they are. They are essentially ethnic parties. And when you speak of crisis, for me, it speaks to something that can destroy the party. I do not believe that what's happening now can destroy the PNC or PPP. We have seen this in the PPP too, what a stake, something of this maximum leader business going on for some time. So I don't think that it's a crisis in the sense of having the capacity to destroy the party. It's a crisis, if you mean by that, of making it impossible for the party to be properly organized to confront the government and possibly take government from the PPP. If you mean by that, yes, it's a crisis. Because right now, what we have, and I'm flabbergasted by it, is a leadership that is in former President Granger that is demonstrating a total undemocratic behavior. This is undemocratic what he's doing. And he's not explaining why he's behaving in this undemocratic way. He wishes to run a country democratically. He wishes to go forward democratically. But all the things he has been reported as doing are essentially undemocratic. How then, outside of having an ethnic base, can you expect people to consider the party you are running undemocratic, democratic if you are behaving in this kind of a fashion? And he's doing nothing to deny it. All he's explaining as we go forward is the outcome of what he has done. Well, I have gotten two parties, and it's ludicrous. How can two new parties just came into being and he wants to equate them with the WPA and so on? That kind of a thing. So, I'm at a loss myself, just unless to say he has lost it, because I cannot believe that you can want to run a national party in a democratic country and behave in this totally undemocratic fashion. Obviously to all. It is not like you are saying it's oligarchy or nothing. It's obvious to everyone. So how can you want to tell other people that you're going to run the country democratically? So in that way, I believe, yes, it's in a crisis.
It's in a crisis in one way, but it's not a crisis that will threaten or that is threatening to destroy the party. And Norman Brown, I'm going to bring you in. You are making your debut on Politics 101, so we'll bring you in as the second opening batsman. If Dr. Jeffrey's Greenwich, then of course you are Haynes. In that famous opening partnership. Is the PNC in crisis, Norman?
Thank you for having me, Dr. Hines. A special good night to the guests and to your viewers. The PNC is in crisis, but I want to say that it is a positive at the moment because the crisis that it is faced with will determine once and for all that the People's National Congress will be stronger coming out of this. It will become stronger because what we are seeing now is Davis Granger's leadership or lacking thereof is signaling to members of the party and supporters of the party that enough is enough. And it will be unprecedented at this juncture, Dr. Hines, because the younger generation will speak up and they will speak out. And that is what is happening now. The party executives are speaking out and they're saying that Mr. Granger must go, Amna Ali must go. And so I believe that this signals a moment in the party's history where no other leader or members of the executive will be allowed to behave the way Mr. Granger is behaving at the moment. I want to say quickly that it is not surprising to me because I believe that the time has come for the party to be truly representative of its constituencies, of its constituency, its members and its supporters, and that the party must be united at the top and that it must hear its members and supporters. And so as this saga unfolds, we hope that the positive that comes out is that Mr. Granger goes, and those who are in the party who are not related to groupthink, that they also should make an exit. So I do believe that the party is in crisis, but I believe that it is a crisis that will bring about a positive very soon.
Mr. Buck, you have not been shy of letting your views known on what is going on in the party ever since the end of the election last year and even before. Do you believe the party is in crisis? Is Rickford there?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It's good to see Norman and Dr. Jeffrey. I don't think the party is in crisis. The PNC is a political bastion of Black people and some others who don't support the PPP. What is happening in the party is nothing that is different from any other political party in the region and around the world. Whenever there's a perceived leadership vacuum, and in fact, elections approaching, people are vying for positions. And so the only thing I don't like is the factionism that has emerged. So I don't think the party is in crisis. The party has a challenge right now because so many people are running for the leadership, and there's a vacuum in leadership because Mr. Granger's leadership has completely collapsed. I think Mr. Granger is a spent force who should retire and go home and enjoy his pension. The party is at this juncture now because the party leadership throughout for the last 2 decades has completely shut out young people from the leadership. So you have leaders right now who are all over 65 in a country where the electorate, 50% or so of the electorate is, or 54% is below age 50. So the leadership is completely out of touch with the electorate and the rank and file members of the party. Mr. Granger has a very archaic leadership style. It's suited for the 60s or the 70s. I don't think what is happening in the party now is anything new. The leadership of the party has always exercised almost maximum power, where the party allows the leadership to make certain calls. I think what has happened with Mr. Granger is that he moved away from the core constitutional values of the party. And he did not, in his governance of the country, have a political philosophy and underpinning that was guided by the party. He ran the party and the government as two separate things. That cannot happen. And that's why I know that he's a failed politician, because a government has to be governed by a political party that is a political philosophy that is informed by a political party. And so he divorced the two. And Mr. Granger doesn't understand politics. I mean, I don't want to knock him. I've said what I've said about him. He just doesn't understand politics. And he doesn't understand that you can only maintain governance if you have a constituency that you have satisfied and addressed. So coming back to the question, the party is not in crisis. What I would like to see is younger people in the party taking up the reins of leadership. I want to follow up on a point Norman just said, which I've always said. The party's leadership must be represented, the various constituencies in the PNC. Because whether you like it or not, the PNCR itself is a coalition. It's a coalition of different people and ethnicities and populations in the country. And the leadership must now represent those various constituencies in the party. And that's why I've called for an expansion of the leadership. There needs to be a leader, 2 deputy leaders, a chairman, 2 vice chairman, a general secretary, 2 assistant general secretaries. And people occupying those positions must reflect every constituency in the party. And I don't understand for the life of me where all these guys with who have been around for the last 30, 40 years are still vying for leadership, when we have so many young people, so many young MPs in the lead, in Parliament right now. These guys are still vying for leadership. Somebody needs to hold them and throw them through the window at Congress Place. I worked there. I worked as the special assistant to the leader of the party. At one point in time when I was 17 years old, I convinced Mr. Desmond Hoyt, who was the leader, to bring in young people. And it was my responsibility to go out there and recruit young people. I recruited Valda Lawrence to join the party. I recruited some medical doctors. I recruited Raphael Trotman. I have been trying to recruit Nigel Hughes for the longest while. That's what we need. So we have a bunch of bright, young visionaries in the party, and they're not giving them an opportunity to lead. So I'm calling for, and I have been calling all the time, for a young leader, a young chairman, and the deputies can very well be these experienced guys, but give the young people a chance. It is time to hand over the reins of the party to a new generation of young people.
Redford, I think you introduced the point that I was going to follow up with you, and that is that there is a young cadre in the parliament. I think it's not fair to say. I mean, as parliamentarians, they're in leadership positions. Don't you agree?
They're in leadership positions in the parliament. They're not in leadership positions in the party hierarchy.
All right. Okay.
And that's the point I'm making.
All right. I got you. Listen, all 3 of you have zeroed in your first answers on Granger. So obviously, you have identified Mr. Granger's leadership as part of the problem, even if it's not a crisis, as part of the problem. But don't you all think that what happened during the election last year would have had some consequences for the party? And I take you back to 1953, when after the intervention of the British, nudged on by the Americans, that the consequence of that intervention was that the party split twice. They split in 55, split in 56. And all of us agree that there was some external intervention last year, and there were other factors, of course, other than the external intervention. But do you think what happened at the election, the fact that the party was thrown out of office in the circumstances, some of it its own doing, some of its external forces, etc. Do you think that has had a direct effect on what's happening in the party now? I'll start with you, Dr. Jeffrey.
First of all, thank you. I am not certain that the party split in the early days as a result of British intervention. I believe the first split came because there was a quarrel over who should be the leader of the party. Indeed, it's a historical situation that is there, that chairman became, when you promised the man chairman, he thought he'd be leader, and then the whole thing got confused when Burnham came here, and so on. So that wasn't the result of any kind of a British
Or was it exacerbated by the intervention and the loss of government?
Well, the PPPs, remember that it was the PPP's loss of government was engineered by the United States.
Right.
And it was engineered in the context that there was already a split in the PPP. Indeed, Burnham did not even want to get involved with the engineering, but he saw the opportunity, and went with it. It's totally different from what's happening here. Remember, at that time, the struggle was supposed to be against international communism. This was a regime that was, in terms, if you believe that Jigan was a communist, that was going to enslave all peoples around the world. Therefore, this was an international attempt to say that we must protect a free world against what is taking place. There's nothing like that at this point of time. Essentially, the intervention now is strictly for personal, political and ethnic power. That is what is taking place now. That's totally different from what took place then. What is whether or not what we are seeing here in terms of Mr. Granger is not new. I mean, look at how, I think I mentioned it on your program before, look at how he appointed the head of the energy agency. Everybody wake up in your party and says, but we had a committee that was going to do this, but suddenly this person is appointed and we don't, where does this person come from? What you are faced with is a kind of personalized behavior that is essentially autocratic. And it is not good for this part of the 21st century. You have to curtail it. I'm not anything to do with the PNC. I'm just saying it has to be curtailed, perhaps with what Rickford spoke to, like some kind of collective leadership or something. But it has to be dealt with. You cannot go forward to a country with this kind of autocratic leadership and claim you want to rule it democratically. The party itself, I praised the PNC at the time that Granger came to office when it introduced primaries, if you remember.
Yes.
The party introduced primaries where the leader had to go around and speak to everybody, and there had to be a vote. Of course, at the end of the day, there was some confusion of what taking place at the last moment. But even so, you need to have a democratic party to run a democratic country. And Mr. Granger is showing none of that at this point of time. Old, young thing or what? You have to have a democratic party if you want to say you're going to run a democratic country. The PPP itself, we accuse of oligarchy, and the leader, has been mentioned. All these leaders, all these political parties, they fall under the iron law of oligarchy, where essentially, once you control the general secretary and the books and the agenda and the meeting, you stay in government. That is what, and you stay in position. Go to all the political parties, all the trade unions, all the cooperative society. They are like that. And the idea is to move them away from that. And when the PNC introduced primaries, they were attempting to move away from that. Now, the person the primary has thrown up has become worse. It is totally autocratic, and you cannot go to a country, and that is, if there's a crisis, that is it. It's there. You cannot go to a country with an autocratic leader claiming you want to run a democratic country.
No, let me bring you in before Norman here, because you'll have to leave us a little bit early. And I'm posing the same question to you. Do you think the differences that emerged during the 5 months within the leadership of the PNC on how to deal with the crisis of that time, do you think what we're seeing now is really a throw over from those differences that developed during the 5 months?
That is true, and also there's another element of it. Listen, I do not have any sympathies for the executive members of the party. They sat down and allowed Mr. Granger to become an autocrat, if he is one. They are just as responsible for the state of the party as Mr. Granger. Even when Mr. Granger was president and we wrote to him and we wrote party members, they wouldn't course correct. That's why they lost power. They weren't listening to anybody. Mr. Granger wasn't listening to anybody, and they weren't ensuring that Mr. Granger was kept in check and that he was following advice and that he was running a proper party. Mr. Granger ran the party into the ground because he's not a proper leader. He doesn't understand politics and he doesn't understand how to run a country. And the party members who understand politics, some of whom have been in government, some of them who know how to govern, allowed him to do nonsense and make mistakes. And these mistakes proved to be fatal. They lost power.
Now, why do you think these people who knew better allowed him to do that?
I don't know. For instance, when Mr. Granger made the decision to call CARICOM to do a recount or whatever it is, which was in total contravention of the Constitution of Guyana, I spoke out, Vincent Alexander and some of the other people, but everybody who was in the cabinet and in the party leadership with Mr. Granger, they didn't speak out.
But there are reports that some of the top leaders disagreed with him, and there were vehement arguments within the leadership of the party within the 5 months. Have you not heard that?
The fact of the matter is that nothing happened. There's a cabinet and there's a party central executive committee, which is, in terms of the party, the decision-making forum of the party in the absence of a Congress and a General Council. Mr. Granger is not a power out himself. He's governed by a constitution. If they held him to account from the beginning, we wouldn't maybe have gotten this far in terms of what has happened. Number two, in terms of the government, I've heard and I know situations where like for instance, myself, I'm a political strategist in the Democratic Party here. I run campaigns. I develop strategies, right? I write and give advice for a living. I make maybe millions of dollars. I have been giving them free advice and advice that makes sense. Other people have been giving them advice. Mr. Granger does not take advice. Now, you think if I was an executive member, Mr. Granger could get away with the things that they're complaining about? No. The executive members of the party...
I hear the Granger thing. Are there other factors that have led to the problems that we are seeing in the PNC right now? Other than Granger, we have accepted that Granger, there seems to be consensus that he's a big part of the problem. Are there other factors? That's what
of course there are. One is that they have not cultivated a succession leadership in the party. All of them thought they would be invincible and be around forever and be young forever and be in party leadership. They did not plan for the future 15 and 20 years ago. That's the first thing. They completely shut off the young people. I remember I was criticized when I said in 2017, this party is going to end up in trouble. They're pushing young people out. They're anti-youth. Young people must form their own party and then join the coalition. They criticized me. Look where we are now. I became an executive member of the YSM at 16, right? I rose straight to the leadership of the YSM.
All right. So,
By the time I was 17. So the point I'm making, Dr. Hines, is that in my era, when I was a youth leader, there were opportunities in the party. There's Monroy, Burnham had very young ministers that I was told, I was around then. But even on the Hoy, we were given opportunities. I don't know what happened after that. And so that's why I keep blaming the executive members also. They have a responsibility to help govern the party with the leader. And they allowed Mr. Granger to get away with some of these things on the early onset of his leadership, and now they're complaining. And they bear some of the responsibility. And I want to say this, as I observe now, the amount of people who are running for leadership, I'm not hearing any of them talking about their plans to hand over leadership of this party to a new generation of young people. And that concerns me. I still see some of the people who are around the 60s running for leadership. And that concerns me. I want to see a party where young people, young visionaries are vying for leadership and occupy leadership in the party so that we could prepare this party for new governance, a new way of thinking, and satisfy the electorate where 54% might very well be under age 45. That's the kind of party I want to see.
And that point is well taken. Aubrey Norton was on this program, and he laid out his plans for bringing young people into the central mix of the party, in fairness to him. But let me bring you in here, Norman, and I ask you the same question. Apart from Mr. Granger, are there other factors that developed during the crisis last year that may have spilled over into not the crisis, but the situation in the party at the moment? You're muted.
I would want to agree. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
That there are other factors that contributed to this situation that makes the PNC looks bad. We have to understand that the PNC went into government as a coalition. I strongly believe that the AFC would have done more damage to the coalition and to causing the elections to be lost more than Mr. Granger's direct leadership as president of Guyana.
Explain that.
I want to say, look, let me say this to you. We're dealing with real politics in the context that after 23 years, the party was given the opportunity to return to power. And within 5 years, the party was out of power. There are a number of factors that we have to look at in the context of real politics. What this younger generation expected, what people wanted, and that was not satisfied. Let me give you an example. Let me give you a quick.
The AFC is responsible for what is going on in the PNC right now.
No, I'm not saying that.
Okay, tell me what you're saying.
No,
we're talking about the PNC, and you were saying that the AFC would have done more damage to the PNC than Granger.
No, I'm talking about the coalition in the context of the coalition.
Yeah.
But let me go back to the PNC aspect.
Yes, that's what we're talking about.
Okay, good. Sorry for that deviation. In terms of the PNC, I believe that David Granger is the major problem.
Yes, we have nailed that down. What other possible factors may have led to the kind of impasse that we're seeing in the party?
Well, I really can't answer that. There is the factionalism in the party. I believe that as Rick Ford said, the executives did not put their feet down. They did not connect the party to the government.
Mm-hmm.
They did not connect. They worked in a void, and so Mr. Granger was allowed to have that kind of maximum sort of control over the government. That's basically what it is.
Yeah,
But what
let me pin you down on that, Norman.
Mhm.
The PNC, like the PPP and all parties, major parties in the English-speaking Caribbean, they've all had maximum leader. Wasn't Burnham a maximum leader? Wasn't Hoyt a maximum leader? Wasn't Jagan a maximum leader? What is different with Granger? If you're saying, if we put in Granger's maximum leadership in the spotlight, what is different? What is different between his maximum leadership and Burnham's or Hoyt?
Look, Dr. Hines, that is why I didn't want to, within the framework of the question, I wanted to deal with this issue more, not only as the PNC, but as the coalition and the factors that would have affected it. But the whole issue with David Granger had nothing to do with his presidency per se. It had more to do with the election period, the aftermath, and what he had done in terms of being a real leader.
Okay. Let me Adriana Thomas has joined us. I don't know how much of the conversation she has heard. Adriana, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
I don't know how much of the conversation you have heard to date, but I posed the first question to the panel, and it was a broad question, whether the PNC is in crisis at the moment. And in fairness, I'm throwing that question to you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hines, and I apologize for joining late. I had some technical difficulties. To get straight to the question, I don't think the PNC is in crisis at all. Every organization goes through challenges at various times. I think that the PNC has found itself as an organization in a changing environment nationally, regionally, and internationally. And therefore, for me, the PNC's response is what could put it into a crisis. And this is the PNC's response to the challenges, the challenging environment nationally, regionally, and globally. So I don't think that, as a matter of fact, I think that the current governance approach in Guyana, the current change in economic and other dynamics in Guyana, the changes occurring in the region and globally has presented an excellent opportunity for the PNC, or if the PPP wanted to take that opportunity to become the party that will transform Guyana. So I think the PNC is well positioned to transform Guyana if it can develop a strategy to respond to the current challenging environment within which it has found itself.
What about Mr. Granger's leadership that has come under the microscope here on this program tonight, and certainly in other fora? What's your perspective on his leadership as far as the differences that are emerging or that have emerged in the party?
I think that Mr. Granger, I will look at the leadership in the context of authority. As the leader of the PNC, Mr. Granger has the authority. Just today, I was reading an official statement that came out from members of the executive of the PNC, and it was published in one of the main newspapers. And as I read the statement and I tried to analyze what was written in the statement, the challenge is with the authority, because the statement did not even go out as an official statement from the central executive of the party, because I gather that they cannot send out an official statement on the leader of the party. So the big challenge in the PNC is that Mr. Granger holds the authority. And the challenge is to either remove or replace that authority. And I totally get it, because nothing will move except Mr. Granger moves. Or things will move based as the leader of the party, based on the pace of Mr. Granger. So I think I understand the dynamics which are currently happening in the PNC in terms of challenging I think it's more the modus operandi of Mr. Granger. And I think rightly so, they should challenge it. And I think part of what is happening in the PNC, I would look at it more from in the context of what is it the party wants to achieve. And I think the leadership will also have to tie into the vision and the purpose of the party at this point. And therefore, as I analyze what is happening in the PNC, one gets the impression that the vision is not clear if there is a vision. The purpose is not clear if there is a purpose. And so what I see is more a group of people as against a team of leaders who are working towards a specific purpose with a specific vision. So in that context, I think that the leadership of Mr. Granger is being questioned severely, and rightly so. I also think that, so I will end there at Dr. Hines for now, and to say that I do believe that the party ought to challenge the leadership of Mr. Granger if they feel that the leadership is not rolling out the vision and sort of making the purpose of the party clear, because the world around the PNC is moving. It has not stopped. And therefore, the PNC has to very seriously think about how it will address the issues which are occurring around it. And I'll say this, leadership, you're a leader because you have followers. As a political party, you can't afford to take 9 months and do nothing. You have followers. You have 200 and something thousand people who voted for your party. And therefore, and the reason you're a leader, like I said, is because you have a followership. And therefore, you are responsible. You have an accountability and a responsibility to that followership to address not only issues, but to design a pathway to make the vision clear to them, to sort of redesign a purpose around which not just the leadership and the organization of the PNC will be mobilized, but also the followership. And I think that if I can be very blunt, in my view, Mr. Granger has not done that over the past 9 months.
Okay, so we've had two important points being raised there, three important points. One that Norman hinted at, and that is the coalition. The PNC was part of a coalition, and whether in fact, as the major party in the coalition, they managed the coalition properly. And that has had repercussions for the post-election era. Second, and the question of what is different between Mr. Granger's maximum leadership and the maximum leadership before his leadership. And thirdly, the point that Adriana just raised, how has the party reacted to the situation since August? When I come back, and I'm going to start with Jeffrey, then I'll go to...
I have to, if I can make I have to run, but I want to make, when you come back, I'll wait, because I want to make
when I come back, I'll start with you, and then I'll go to Jeffrey, and then I'll come to the other two. So we're going to take a short break, do the PSA, and then we'll come back and go to Rickford.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. Thank you in advance for your donation.
And welcome back, and those of you who have made your donation, thank you very much. Those of you who have not done so yet, there is still time to do so through the media that have been advertised there. Rickford, those three questions: management of the coalition, the difference between the maximum leadership of Mr. Granger and those who went before him, and the party and its response to the post-election period beginning in August. All three to you, because we know that you have to go. Go right ahead.
Thanks. Well, first of all, I have said Mr. Granger, who has had a pretty reasonably successful presidency, is a failed political leader. He's not a politician. And when people are not politicians and they're thrusted into leadership, they have to recognize that they're not politicians and take political advice. The difference, as I think I'm uniquely positioned here, I advised a leader of the party before.
Yeah, but that's the question, Richard. Did Mr. Granger and the party manage the coalition effectively when they were in office?
Well, I'm segueing into that. And right, so and I don't know about Mr. Gordon, but I could speak about Desmond Hoyt.
No. I'm talking about Mr. Granger's management of the coalition.
Oh, I thought you listed three things.
Yes.
You wanted me to respond to them.
All right, go ahead. Take them in which order?
Exactly, yeah. So I was dealing with why he has the problem right now. And I was saying the problem is because of his personality. He's not a politician. He's a stubborn person who doesn't take advice. And he doesn't understand that if you want to be a successful political leader, you have to take political advice and have a political strategy. He had none. That's number one. Number two, these people, the other leaders that I know about, at least Mr. Hoyt, had a team of people around them, where even if they're not making decisions at the central exec, they had a caucus. Mr. Hoyt had a very, very active shadow cabinet that met weekly and so on. They had a research team, they had a writing team, a PR team, and so on. I don't know that Mr. Granger took advice from that team if they had one. And so that's why he ended up in trouble, because he was not a politician. He wasn't making wise political decisions. The other thing is, in terms of the management of the coalition, one could have seen disaster from the beginning. Mr. Granger has an isolationist personality. Right? He's an introvert, and if you criticize him, he just locks him and isolates everybody. So that's what he did with the party, and that's what he did with the government, and that's what he did with the country. He isolated the country from the international community. He isolated the government from the international community. He isolated the party. And that's why the party has this big responsibility now to reestablish itself, reconnect itself with allies around the region, around the world, and to the international community. And I want to stress in terms of the coalition.
Of the coalition?
Yeah. I understand that since the initial meeting of the coalition, there's never been a meeting of the coalition partners, even throughout the time when they were in government. David Granger never convened a conference, a congress, a retreat of the coalition partners. Now I'm saying, why did the coalition partners allow this to happen? It's the same thing with the party executive. Why did they allow Mr. Granger to make all the decisions at Office of the President, rather than coming to Congress Place, meeting with the central executive, getting political directives based on the party's priority for the country, the party's political philosophy? That should have governed the strategy. The party's philosophy, priorities should have been the underpinning of the government, and a strategy to govern the country based on that. That didn't happen. It didn't happen in the coalition, and it didn't happen with the party. That's why they're out of power.
In fairness, Pickford, I know of one party from the beginning to the end kept saying to the Guyanese people and the PNC, this man was not governing the coalition properly. Don't say they sat and talked. It's not true. Right?
Well, your advocacy wasn't successful because nothing happened.
Yes, that can be said, but don't say a certain book. Right.
But I have to run off to another meeting now. Go ahead.
Adriana raised the question of what has happened since the election, and the party not going to its followers.
Well, my understanding every time I inquire is that Mr. Granger doesn't want this, Mr. Granger wants that. I want to know why they're listening to Mr. Granger. Mr. Granger is a spent force. Yes, he's leader of the party, but what he's going to do? Pull them out of parliament because he's the representative of the list? At this point in time, I would listen to Mr. Granger. Listen, I have every respect for Mr. Granger. Mr. Granger is a former president. He should not be leader of the party. He should have resigned immediately after the party's defeat and allow another person to take up the leadership. I see he's running again now. He hasn't said that to me. I don't know if it is true. I don't listen to much what he has to say. But if he's running now, I think he should be defeated. Mr. Granger is almost 80. What is he doing running for a political party leadership now when he just had a failed election? Allow other people to take up the leadership of the party and run with it with a new vision. That's my perspective.
Before you go forward, is there anything positive you want to say that Mr. Granger contributed to the PNC? And I'll come with the government here now and talk to the party.
Well, of course, he is the only party leader that led the party to victory with a coalition since 1992. And I give him credit for that. Of course, he's a man of integrity. He had great credibility, and that's what helped propel him to the presidency. And we must give him credit for that. I've said that he had a reasonably successful presidency. He could have been more successful had he been guided by his party's priorities and political philosophy. And that didn't happen. I would have loved to see the coalition do more. I think the party lost power because of his stubbornness and his unwillingness to take advice. And he jumped and he did things that were unconstitutional. I said that. The court bore me out. The court struck down his deed with CARICOM. And that's what railroaded the party out of power.
You're the senior statesman here. You're the political scientist.
Dr. Jeffrey is the political scientist.
Dr. Jeffrey, some difficult questions here, boy. Let's start first with what's different between Granger's maximum leadership and the maximum leadership before him, if there is a difference?
There is a difference in the sense that maximum leaders were challenged in the past. If you remember, after the defeat of 1957, Burnham was telling the PNC that they should join with the UDP, and they refused. And they lost the election. And come 1961, again, Burnham went and said we should join with the United Democratic Party. No, the United Democratic Party. Yes, that was a middle-class black people.
John
Carter and that lot.
And John and them.
And then they said, no, we are not joining again. And Burnham said to them, well, I am telling you this because he was challenged. And Burnham said, if you're all not going to join, I am going to leave the PNC and the country and go off, I think I was told, to Ghana or somewhere, and that will be it for me. And they sat down and they said, if he felt so strongly about it, perhaps, yeah, let's run with it. And the rest is history. And that is how it was put to me anyway. And the rest is history. So Burnham was challenged. David Granger, as an autocratic personality, he came to office, and to challenge him, that's why he got away with it, would have been essentially to put at risk your own position. And many people did not challenge him. I know you, David, you were out there making the kind of noises that should have been made internally. But internally, people might have been saying yes and no and so on. But when it was finished, and they went their way. You have to have somebody that will stick to the things they say. Adriana said that he's the leader and he has the authority. He does not have the authority to behave autocratically. It does not. The rule says you are a leader, and as I've just tried to explain what happened to Burnham, you are a leader, but you lead in a certain context. You lead in a context of discourse and in a committee and so on. You listen to people. Even if you have to make your own arrangements so that your voice in the central exec become more pronounced. That's Burnham and all these leaders do and so on. You have to go there and face the challenges. Granger don't even want to go to a press conference. He doesn't want even to face a press conference. And that's why he isolates himself. He isolates himself and he goes along and do these things. And he don't stick to his premises. You're talking about the managing the coalition. How can you manage a coalition? If you have a coalition like the AFC, the essence of the AFC, because your vote come essentially from Afro-Guyanese, the essence of the AFC must be to try to, although they are poaching on you more or less, but they poach on anybody that is weak. And that was your position should have been to try to strengthen them. You should have been trying to strengthen the AFC in that given direction. But what happens? Firstly, you promised. You say, oh, Moses is going to chair this, Moses is going to chair that, which the Constitution allows. Next thing you know, no Moses and chairing anything. Now you are destroying the AFC. You are destroying them. So the next thing you know, you are saying, you go and you want the AFC to get Indian votes, but you go and you knock off 7,000 people in the sugar industry. Where you think it after the AFC? What do you think you're helping them? Or you are destroying them? The AFC, of course, of itself. And you see this, it's always when you're in power and people have power, they sit down and believe it's going to be all right, or somebody explain to them that it's going to be all right, but never. A day in politics is a long time. The AFC should have been, you should have had a strategy of how the AFC is going to take support from the PPP, not sit there doing everything that you can possibly do. You have party comments running around saying, what does the AFC bring? What does the AFC bring? And you're encouraging it. So effectively, you have helped to destroy the AFC. And because you had power, as I began by saying, people are more or less being mum. They're not saying much. David Granger is an autocratic individual. The PNC and the coalition in government helped to destroy the AFC's potential to do what they should have been doing. And that is the end of this story. This ain't got, David Granger don't have any authority to drive, and that is the end of the story. The story is that you have to get a new arrangement, right? Either, and this, in our context, this is, you have to get rid of Mr. Granger, or you have to have an arrangement that will curtail Mr. Granger, because that is, PNC problem now is a leadership problem. It's not all this running around and thing. It has a leadership problem and got to be solved if you're going to have plans. The PNC has not put forward any plans. I mean, you have to sit down. There is nobody in the PNC. Aubrey has come. We were here together, and he has said certain things. But you are talking about put this person as leader. This country is driven by notion that if you got a good leader, you're gonna get a good outcome. But you don't have a good outcome because you got a leader that is old or young or anything. You have an outcome because the leader has a vision and he has sold that vision to the party. Who in the PNC has so far sold a vision to the party? And we still are not demanding this from all the parties in this country. Tell us what you have in mind. That is when we are going to go with you. We are not going with you as a leader of this party. In the end, these are ethnic parties, so you might go with another ethnic person. But we are not going with you as a leader of this party if you don't tell us, give us your vision. Where is the vision? Don't believe that because you go out there and choose Henry Jeffrey, David Hines, and one old or one young, you're going to get good outcome. You got good outcomes in the 1930s. Bonham and Jack was 27. You got a good outcome in Jack Deere. He was about 30-something. You have to have a vision. I think that there's an escapism in people who are always talk about, oh, give it to this generation, give it to... You can do that, but I don't care. But what I'm saying to you, they must come with a vision. They must come with a clear notion and sell it to me of what you are going to do. So my problem right now, as you said, what now the PNC is that they got to deal with the leadership issue. That is the issue. Right.
Leadership issue.
That is what they have to do. Because if they don't deal with that, they can't create a collective vision to sell to anybody in Guyana. And David Granger, in my view, as an individual, should not be the individual leader of this. If they want to succeed, I mean, yes, because he has not given any indication that he's capable of doing that.
Thank you, Henry. One of the viewers, Mr. David Hines, can you get Mr. Granger to come on your program so that he can have an open mic to support us? No, I don't think so.
That's a good idea.
I will try, but Mr. Granger, I don't think that I am in Mr. Granger's good book. But a leader should not look at whether somebody is in your good book or bad book. I will make the invitation on your behalf. Other people are supporting the suggestion. I will make the invitation to Mr. Granger on your behalf, and we'll see what happens. Let me shout out my partner, Danette Booker, my running mate. I miss you, girl. You left me, you're gone. But then you're good that you join us tonight. Mr. Brown, Mr. Norman Brown, wait there. Norman? Is Norman with us?
Step out.
Oh, okay. Adriana, let me come back to you. You raised the question of authority. Dr. Jeffrey differs. Do you want to come back with a response to that?
Sure. I think that when I talk about authority, I was speaking in the context of the position. And so he has the position of the leadership. And as we would have seen when the central executive had indicated to him that their disagreement on the two parties, which were co-opted into the APNU, and by extension the PNC, Mr. Granger came back and he said that he still support the two parties. And then, so as the person with the position, that's what I meant when I talked about authority. So that's my comeback on what Dr. Jeffrey said. He probably has, I can change the word authority to power. And but not necessarily the authority. So the other point I'd like to make is that Mr. Granger, to be a successful political leader, you need to have conceptual skills, technical skills, and people skills. Mr. Granger has no doubt conceptual skills, but I don't think that he has the technical skills which are required to translate those conceptual skills into reality or into action. And he also does not have the best of people skills. So I think that what he needed, like Rick Furt said, he needed to have, Mr. Granger doesn't have to be perfect. He didn't have to be perfect as a president, neither as the leader of the PNC and of the APNU and AFC coalition. But he needed to recognize that managing a government, it's a dynamic experience. And therefore, you have to have people, experts, specialists around you who you listen to, who you take advice from, who you not just say, okay, but you would act based on what they say to you. And therefore, so he didn't have to have all of the technical skills, but he needed to have people who he would listen to, who had those technical skills. The other point I'd like to make too is that I studied partnership building. And there's a science and an art to building partnerships, to bringing people together to work together. So if Mr. Granger is having a difficult time being the leader for one party, you can imagine why being a leader for a coalition that was so dynamic was difficult, because there's a science and an art to bringing people together, motivating them, managing them, sustaining that partnership. It's about building the partnership. It's about managing the partnership and sustaining the partnership. And from what we would have seen, Mr. Granger was able to build the partnership. And if I'm to grade him, I will give him a high grade for building the partnership. For managing and sustaining the partnership, that was where he fell down. And therefore, I think we have reached a stage where we have to be very frank and blunt about the leadership of the PNC. And I'll tell you why, Dr. Hines, because I remember there was a time when people used to say in Guyana that I don't care who win the elections and who lead, because I still have to work hard anyway. I think after the last elections, people have realized that leadership is important. The PNC as an organization, I would say the PNC is a political organization, but it should also evolve into a civil society organization. And I can explain that later. But I think what the last elections has shown is that leadership, it's very important. It's about economics. It's about the social aspects of life. It's about growth and development. And so we can no longer say that it doesn't matter whether Mr. Granger moves or not. It doesn't matter whether the PNC get themselves together or not. It matters. It matters. And therefore, the PNC has to get itself together, even if it means that Mr. Granger has to be removed. I think also, if I can say on this, we are generally in Guyana settlers. And that's one of the reasons why you find leadership can get away with a lot of what our leadership has been getting away with. And settlers, we're settlers. We essentially accept things. We're not necessarily pioneers. And so we have some pioneering people. We have some perspectives, if I can put it in the three values mode, so to speak. But we're essentially settlers. So we would say that, okay, Mr. Granger is a nice man. Give him another chance. I've been reading some comments, and people are saying that that give him a chance. He didn't get to do. He has integrity. He's a nice person. He didn't. I've even heard people say that some of the strong, the old heads in the PNC did not allow him to do what he wanted to do. I want to be very practical and pragmatic to say that giving Mr. Granger another chance, what guarantee do you have that he's going to do he's going to perform as a better leader? And here is why I'm saying that. To be a successful leader, you need conceptual skills, technical skills, and people skills. So even if it is decided that you will give him another chance, he doesn't have the technical skills required to lead the country in the direction that it has to go. He doesn't have the people skills. He hardly even engaged with the media and with his supporters. So let's be pragmatic and practical. If we're going to give him another chance, the questions we have to ask is, does he have the technical skills? Or is he going to listen to a team of technical experts and take their advice? Is he going to understand that this political party, or it's about having goals and a vision and working towards achieving those goals and those objectives and that vision? And in order to do that, you need to take advice. You need to take advice. You need to act on the advice that you get. Because the idea is to achieve the goals and the objectives which are being set. The other point that I'd like to make, Mr. Granger came out a few weeks ago after being hidden for months, and he said that he was very instrumental in winning 2 elections, which was in 2011 and 2015. Rightly so. He revived the PNC. I think what he brought was moral capital. He brought a personality that boosted the moral capital of the PNC. And it led the coalition to a majority opposition. And subsequently in 2015, the coalition became the government. And so he was right. He led the coalition to 2 victories, or the PNC to 2 victories. But here is where coming back to the point in terms of, and this is where we're more initiators as people too, in addition to being settlers, than finishers. So Mr. Granger was happy to have initiated a process. What we need now, is he the right leader to finish? And so we have to move from being satisfied to have leaders who are happy to just have initiated a process, to have leaders who have the drive and the passion and the desire to finish a process. And that process that I'm talking about is that after 56 years, we have not achieved what we have set out to achieve as a country. And so is Mr. Granger the person who is going to help us to finish that, what we set out to achieve in 1966?
In your estimation, is Aubrey Norton that person?
I think Aubrey Norton is. I've been having conversations on Aubrey Norton's leadership and his what he can bring to the leadership of the PNC. And I agree with some people who said that Aubrey Norton is more situational leader. And I think what is currently happening to the supporters of the PNC is, and I have to say this, if we're talking politics, I think the PPP came into government in August. And I must say that they surprised many of us. For the older people, they may not have been surprised, but I am surprised. I have heard about racism in Guyana. I have heard about the 1960s, but I've never experienced it. I did not grow up. The first time in Guyana, I really experienced racism where I was conscious was when I was in my early 20s. What it means is that when I was growing up, that was not my orientation. However, the past 9 months, I have seen racism, and for me, I consider myself to be a very moderate person. For me to actually say that this is racism is because it is racism. And so I think that in terms of, and what happened, the PPP came into government, I think, in August. And I think many people felt that, okay, they have a lot of things in their system and they probably needed to get those things out. So give them some space. And then maybe after 2-3 months, they would have gotten those things out of their system. And then we will move on towards doing governance and building a country. But I think we soon realized that this was not about getting some things out of your system. This was a conviction that people had. And I was asking, what was that conviction? And we were having discussions on what was that. I'm coming to why I think Aubrey Norton will be an appropriate leader at this point. And I think the PPP took a course of action over the past 9 months that I am saying to you at my age, for people younger than me, it surprises. I am surprised. And so what the PNC and what happened was I heard when the Henry boys were murdered, were murdered. I heard a young person who was going to the protest at the Square of the Revolution said something on a television interview. He said, I've heard my parents and they asked him, why did you come out here? He said, because I've heard my parents and my grandparents talked about racism and talked about this, but I've never experienced it. And here is this young man, maybe in his late teens, early 20s. He's saying that I am now seeing with my own two eyes racism in my country. And so I'm saying to you that I have never in Guyana experienced racism. And what is happening now, it is racism. And I will call it by its name. And it's coming from people who you depend on who you are depending on to take care of you, if I put it that way.
Yeah.
Hence, the PNC has to have a response that would address what is currently happening in the society. In addition to addressing it, they also have to mitigate a way forward. Because so I said that to say that I believe that Aubrey Norton can play a role in terms of bringing the PPP government to the table to say to them that we cannot continue along the lines that we're going, in the direction that we're going, particularly as it relates to the bulk of our supporters, and we have to talk.
You wrote a whole article on Aubrey Norton's announcement. I think it was Comment the Man, Comment the Time, I may get it wrong. But coming on the Norton issue.
I believe that the present political aggression of the PPP requires a response. And Norton is the only person I see out there in the leadership that can provide that response. I mean, maybe there are others, maybe they'll come up. But I want to say to you that you must understand the PPP and the PNC where they are. The PPP was not always, when you speak to the PPP, it's not the PPP of the 1970s, the 1990s that are here. You are talking about a minority party, a substantial minority party, who cannot in any way claim, oh, we are representing a majority race and therefore we are being robbed and all that. That is the PNC. The PPP, that is the PPP. The PNC too is a minority party. But both of these parties are vying for exclusive power. Both of them want to get the 50%, 51% of the votes. And they will do anything they do want to get 51%, 52% of the votes. The result is that they are ethnic parties. So they have to solidify their own supporters. I don't know I can't say that for Mr. Granger because he might have had another plan of how he'll stay in office. Because he certainly didn't go out in the first 5 years and try to do it. I think you have to be walking around the country during the election, David, saying, please, excuse them, please excuse them. Because I saw it, I support it. I thought I wrote an article, so you are an apologist.
Yes.
But the point is, I don't know, but what Mr. Jaguar is doing is solidify. First of all, you got to solidify your own base and then try to build base across because he's what? He's 39 point something percent of the population. You can't let your base run away. And because he knows too the black people ain't voting for him in any numbers. This is not like he's got 51%. They're not going to. So he's not going to pay them too much mind. He's going to go and try to build support in places that he thinks that and they think that can do that. Now, so when Adriana is seeing this aggression, let me remind her, because we talk about this racism thing because we are looking at it from one side. I just mentioned it, don't want to mention it again, but I have to. You believe when I'm going to have 7,000 sugar workers that didn't feel his racism? You believe that you can go and convince them that it wasn't racism? That they're not facing racism? But these are ethnic parties. These are how they behave. You can make all the contentions. Oh, the sugar industry needs to be reformed, and then and make. But that takes years to do. You don't knock off 7,000 people at Christmas time. You have to go. You have to develop a plan. You have to bring in their people. You have to say, this is what we'll do over the next 10 years. Look at Mauritius. Look at Latin America. That's what they do to reform sugar industry now. Wake up in the morning. But they would certainly believe that was racism, the very racism you are talking about. And therefore, they needed a response to you. So effectively, we are faced there with two ethnic parties. Both of them are minorities and substantial minority because in even 40% now for the PPPs granted or something. And they want to hold on to power. So they are going to do what they can to hold on to power. The PPP would like us to believe that all their numbers low and feel fair thing. Oh, no, but, this can't vote, but they should go to Maldives, where 500,000 population, 5,000 people voted that weren't supposed to vote. And the election was thrown out by the courts. So don't tell me that. I mean, know it anyway that the people voted as you vote. So that's a joke. But I don't blame most of the Indian people who said, no, it's not true. It's not true because that's what the blacks been doing. When you say Burnham voted, nobody wants to say that all the discrepancies and all the people living on the train lines in England and so on and so on. No, but there were always some black people, middle class like David and them in the WPO saying this thing is ridiculous. but effectively, black people wouldn't say it in the mass. They wouldn't say it, and now it's good that the Indian people have now come to where the black people were. They're not going to say it. They're going to say, oh, no, it's nothing, but they're running from it. Can't confront the low and feel numbers. Can't do it because it's a fact. That is the people on the train line under the PNC. So, effectively, I believe that the leadership, or because we are back to the leadership of the PNC, what now for the PNC? The leadership of the PNC, the leaders of the PNC has got to sit down and think modern. And in modern times, you don't want necessarily any maximum leader. What you want is consensus You want consensus in the party, you want consensus in a government, and you want consensus in the country. And if you can't, and if you can't get that, and Mr. Granger has not demonstrated he's capable of doing that even in his party, you can't build a proper country, you can't go forward. That's my position.
We're coming down to program time, and it's been quite a program. You all have come out in your numbers tonight. As I mentioned on Tuesday, I've begun along with a team from the WPA going around the country and trying to speak with communities and try to help to build back some confidence in those communities that have been shocked by what has happened in the last 9 months, as Adriana has explained, and as Henry has pointed out to us, that has roots that go beyond 9 months. But we were in the quarantine last week, and I think on Sunday we'll be in Golden Grove. So if you're in the Golden Grove area, I'll be coming there along with a team of the from the WPA, trying to rebuild and connections communities, and as Henry says, apologizing for our acts of omission. To help to rebuild confidence, because as we went to the quarantine last week, we heard from people who are completely beaten down by what has happened in the last year. And it's something that we take for granted, and they cry out that nobody goes to them and try to understand their pain. People go to them and do outreaches, but understand their pain and try to do something about it. And we are trying to do that. Perhaps that kind of work has to be done by a certain kind of activist. And we all have to pitch in and do that work. So we'll be in Golden Grove on Sunday, so look out for that. And that's Golden Grove on the East Coast, because we get more than one Golden Grove. Golden Grove and West Bobis and East Bank and so on. Closing thoughts. Adriana, I'll start with you, and then I go to Henry. Your audio.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I would like to close with, I believe that this is the beginning of the end of tribal politics and leadership in Guyana. At the tribal politics and tribal leadership at the political level in Guyana. And I'm saying this because I think I was a part of what was happening in the sugar industry. And while Dr. Jeffrey said that that could have been seen as racism also, I agree. But it does not justify that in an economy that grew last year by 9 times than it grew in 2019. Last year, our GDP was 43.5%. We were doing better, even under previous PPP administration, with a 2.5% growth and a 3% growth. So for me, even though that could be seen as racism too, I still think that the government of the day could have taken the wider economic context in Guyana in terms of this economy is growing, has grown by 43.5% in 2020. Therefore, there is more than enough for the 782,000 people in the country, despite what has happened. So those are some of the wider context within which I thought that governance would have been done. So the other point I'd like to make, and I'll end on this note, is that after 56 years of ethnic politics, we cannot continue like this. And so I believe that this is the beginning, or I hope rather, that this is the beginning of the end of tribal politics in Guyana. I believe that the oil, in terms of our growth trajectory, we have no excuse as it relates to money. And so what we need at this point indeed is we need the kind of leadership that will think in terms of, I see the PNC brought out, and I thought that they're putting a vision together, because today I saw in the statement that came out, they had, I think it was national unity, good governance, and development. I will add to that growth. And I think what it says to me is that the PNC is starting to think of a vision, and they're starting to think of communicating that vision. What they need to do now is to find the kind of leadership that will be able to implement that vision, because it's not good enough to just have it on paper, but you need the kind of leadership that will drive that, and that is going to be engaging and mobilize people at different levels, various sectors of the society around that vision. But I think it's a good start in terms of not just coming up with a vision internally, but communicating that to the wider population, as well as to their wider followers. So, but I think I just want to end also with what I started with by saying that I think that this is an excellent opportunity for the PNC. I don't think they have a crisis with leadership, but it's an excellent opportunity if they can craft a response that is appropriate.
Closing thoughts? Jeffrey? Is Henry with us?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I'm there? Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Gross domestic product and national income are two different things, of course. Gross domestic product, all the oil and all the money Exxon are running away with and carry out, that's counted as the gross domestic product. What is specifically net in the national income, so to speak, is totally different. It's not as great as you may think. Now, secondly, yes, I agree. The question is to deal with the leadership and craft the vision in a consensual way, because thinking of a vision is not having a vision. You have to have a vision, but it must be crafted in a consensual way, not only with your core constituency, but with others. And it's not just PC things you must talk about, because you have to. In what you want a vision for? You want a vision to drive even the lowest person in the country. They must be able to say, when I am acting according to the vision of the whatsoever group. That means that they have to have some overall understanding, not all the detailed understanding. And therefore, you have to craft a vision. Just what David is saying, they're walking around the country and doing. The PNC needs to walk around the country, find out what people want, not only their own constituency, and craft a vision. And then go out and try to sell that vision to people. Without that, of course, proper leadership, not an autocratic old-time leadership, and a proper vision. In both parties, as a matter of fact, they got to throw away this nonsense that the PPP got to keep winning elections to make Guyana good or to keep their people secure. That's nonsense, because they will only achieve that essentially by trying to use the resources that they should be sitting down and talking to people about and doing long-term planning, doing development that is generational and generic, rather than a couple of roads that are going to last 3 years to bribe people to vote for you because you are not a majority party. To get that long-term vision in, you need to speak to the opposition and others, not only the opposition party. So with that, David, I say what Ghana needs now is consensual development.
consensual development. On that note, I want to thank you, Henry. Thank you, Adriana. And thanks to Norman Brown and Rickford Burke, who had to leave us early. I think it was an inspiring discussion. You can tell from the comments, and we had a large viewership tonight, larger than normal. I see my friend Leroy Nelson is in there. He's echoing Mr. Grange is devoid of technical and people skills. Moreover, he was tragically consumed with the supremacy of his will when the country required transformational leadership. I think that sums up what we have been attempting to talk about tonight. Thank you all so much for coming on and helping us to do that. And I said that we were dedicating this week to this discussion. I'm going to extend it to next week because I think we have scratched the surface and we have brought out a lot of important issues. I have been saying recently that it is my firm view that a strong and effective PNC is important for the balance of ethnic power in Guyana. And even as the PNC is going through its travails, we are all hoping that it works it out. And as our panelists say tonight, they're sure that the PNC will work it out because we are at this critical point in our history. As I said, those of us in smaller parties are doing our own work. My party, the WPA, we have begun to go around the country listening to people, comforting people, and what is happening, and trying to get people to get up and act on their own behalf, what we call the Rodneyite idea of self-organization for self-emancipation. Parties are there. Parties will help us when they're in government, but when they're out of government, we are in trouble. And so part of our message is that we have to develop capacity at the community level so that whenever the party or parties that we vote for are out of power, we are able to survive. That's part of the WPA's vision as we go forward in the short term, to help to develop that capacity in our communities for them to be able to survive the onslaught, for them to be able to defend themselves against political and economic aggression. The best way to do that is to build those communities. That's the kind of message we're taking to the communities that we're going to. As I said, we're going to be in Golden Grove on, I think on Sunday. Look out for the notice there if you're in that area, Golden Grove, Aslington, the Backless area, when we come with that message. All of us have to play our part, and different parties have different approaches to the problems that we face, the challenges that we face. But at the end of the day, we all have the same goal, and that is to build equality and equity in Guyana, both at the level of ethnicity, at the level of social class, and certainly at the level of gender. And so next week, we're going to continue this discussion. And what now for the PNC? What now? We are from Hamilton Green and Van West Charles on Tuesday. Tonight we heard from this panel, and I'm going to extend it into next week, because as we speak about the PNC, we're speaking about the country, because the PNC is a formidable force in the country, and Guyana is not going to go anywhere without the PNC. So it is in our interest to discuss what is happening and the challenges facing that party as we move forward. So good night, and remember, let's keep Politics 101 on the air, because we are contributing in our small way to the discussion, the discourse, and the mobilization that is needed right now. Good night.
Please help keep Politics 101 on social media and broadcast television. If you are in North America, please donate via Cash App or PayPal.
If you are in Guyana and the Caribbean and don't have access to Cash App and PayPal, email your pledge to dhines6106@aol.com and we will direct you how to get your donation to us. thank you in advance for your donation.